Yep. So hopefully you're all here for the Q&A. We're going to talk about how to be a better benevolent dictator, more benevolent hopefully and less dictator. Paul is going to have a microphone. If you have questions that you'd like to ask in person, please speak into the microphone so that way they get recorded.
I'm colorblind. Is that green right now?
Sure, do you want to be?
Testing. Are we on? That's
yes,
on?
We're on. That's on.
And it's off when?
When it changes. We can find another volunteer if you'd prefer.
I can't tell the difference between the green and the
Let's let Shorn do it then.
Yeah, hooray for interface design.
Okay, that's fine. We can go through the questions we have here. We can also take questions from this. This is bit.ly/nation building. If you have questions that you don't want to be on the record for, and I'm just going to mirror my screen so I can see it too. I can remember how to do that. Should be up here, shouldn't it? Oh well, I'll look behind me. What is a bike shed? I think we answered yesterday. A bike shed is a project where people feel like they know what's going on and therefore want to offer an opinion. They hope it makes them sound intelligent and engaged. Usually it just ends up in bickering. That's what I wanted. Presentation view. Any hints for an organization of mostly non-geeks where consensus goes smoothly in person but terribly on email, at least when more than about 10 people are involved? I think reminding people that it's still a human being you're dealing with on the email is worth doing. We have this perception that when we're talking to a screen, it's not really a person. Also, most of the people in this room, I would venture a guess, are not writers. We tend to talk with our fingers rather than to write and to compose emails. And so reminding people that they should reread what they've written, reread it with a critical eye and say, how is this going to be taken by somebody who doesn't necessarily assume that I mean the very best? When we're in person, it's much easier to pick up on facial expressions, to pick up on body language cues, and say, of course, this person is trying to work with me to collaborate. We're all going for the same goal. When you're dealing with people over email, you lose all of those cues, and so it's much easier to read a negative tone into those emails. We've done that one. Any more? You have a microphone.
Hello. How do you guys deal with social problems? Like, do you have rules? Do you have moderators?
All of our lists, so all of our lists have moderators. All of our IRC channels have ops, although anything that turns into very controversial on IRC tends to go back to email, simply because at the Apache Foundation, we believe that if it didn't happen on email, it didn't happen. Largely how we deal with social problems is by having a set of norms already encoded. Some of that is written down, although it's very hard to write something that covers all of the nuances and corners of human behavior. The Linux chicks rule used to be polite, be helpful. And that's about as specific as you can get without ending up in knots and arguments. Occasionally we do have problems at Apache where an entire community has gotten to the point, or a majority of a community has gotten to the point where they're not enforcing those same social norms. And in that case, it's a matter of stepping in. Typically the board steps in at that point and replaces the chair. The chair doesn't actually have any particular authority, but as social animals, we tend to look for authority and create these hierarchies. And so shaking that up and saying, nope, hang on, stop what we're doing, let's move forward in a more calm, more collected, more sociable way tends to do the job. Another one up here. Can I talk for a moment about dealing with problem people who continue to cause strife and disruption, especially if they're strong code contributors especially if they drive others away from the project. I mentioned in my talk yesterday, Genius is commodity. Strong code contributors, there are so many of them. You don't need them. If they're driving people away from your project, you're losing more than you're gaining by having their code. Hopefully, you can deal with the person, whether that is helping them to modify their behavior or removing them from the community without losing their code. Sometimes you will lose their code. At Apache, we have a rule that we only accept voluntary contributions. And so if you have donated some code to us, even if we legally have the right to continue using that code, if you are such a problem person that we can't have you in our community anymore and you insist on us taking that out, we'll take it out. We'll tear out features and modules or rewrite them because we just don't want to have that one person who's driving away tens or hundreds of others. It's not worth it. How do you do that? How do you remove that person? Ideally, you work with them first to modify their behavior. And for us, that typically means a senior member of the community working with them one-on-one, mentoring them, talking to them. It has occasionally gone to working with people's employers, where that person is causing a problem both within their company and within our communities. But we try to deal with people as individuals, not as employees. But work with whoever you can. Work with whoever that person listens to try and modify their behavior. Parenting books are great. Seriously, parenting books. You know, rewards, not punishments. Tell them they're doing a great job. Remind them that, you know, this email was really good here, but maybe you should tone it down or take out the personal insults or whatever it is. And if all else fails, remove them. Take away their commit bit, moderate their emails to the lists. Life's too short. How does the Apache Foundation structure apply to smaller communities? Seems like it would be difficult to implement for projects with fewer than 10 regular contributors. Most of our incubator projects, I would say, come in with fewer than 10 contributors. I think as long as you have 3, our rule is always the rule of 3. As long as you have 3 people, you can get out of these stalemates of, you know, 2 people can very easily end up in a me, you tug of war. Whereas when you have 3 people, that triangle just breaks down that direct conflict a little bit. Any social group has norms. 3 or 4 people. You watch a conversation at this conference, a lot of them end up being 3 or 4 people just because of the structure, you know, the way the chairs are laid out and stuff like that. Those groups develop norms immediately. We are social monkeys. And it's simply a matter of saying, what do I want these norms to be? How do I want my community to operate? Am I willing to accept great code from somebody who's jerking us all around? If you accept that when you're 3 or 4 people, that's what you'll have when you're 30 or 40 people. Except that you probably won't get to 30 or 40 people because people will be so fed up of dealing with this.
Just on that, with the 3 people, a lot of the time, at least the dynamics I have seen, is you often get a pair of people who tend to agree strongly and work together, and then a third person who often feels left out or always in contention. How do you handle that?
One of the 2 has to want to handle that. One of the 2 who have power. And with all of these things, the key to implementing change is that somebody who has power has to want to implement that change. Unfortunately, these things are much more difficult if you're the person who is the underdog, if you're the newbie, whatever it is. In that case, if it's really, you know, a situation where there are a group of people in power and they just don't want to change, sometimes forming your own community is the better way to go. Not necessarily when it's 3 people, but when it's a larger group, stepping back and saying, you know, we're actually going to be the nice Pearl people. And forming your own group and saying, no, we're not playing by those rules anymore. Unfortunately, when it's 3 people, it has to be one of the 2, one of the pair has to want to change it. And then if one of the pair does want to change it, it's a matter of being more inclusive. If 2 people strongly agree, you only need to hear one of their opinions. If you're one of those two people and you absolutely agree with what your other contributor is saying, make it a point to pull in the third person and say, what do you think about this? Try and pull out the relevant bits of their argument, because there are for sure relevant bits. It's just that you may not be seeing them because of the personality conflicts.
You have a follow-on?
Yep.
Does the incubator process help break that that problem if you have 3 people who are all thinking together or 2 people in deadlock?
By and large, you won't graduate from incubation at Apache unless you have more than 3 people. But yes, social problems of all kinds are absolutely a barrier for graduation. The Apache Open Office podling is currently going through incubation, and although most of the legal side of stuff is wrapped up and they've made their first podling release and all of that, so the technical side is really going forward very well, that project is not going to graduate to be a full project until they've sorted out their social issues. And again, it's dealing with people on an individual basis, dealing with the community and saying, you all need to shape up. You need to start behaving nicely. You need to be encouraging new people. Obviously, Open Office started with a list as long as my arm of initial contributors, but you need to be attracting new people to your community before you can graduate. Have you lost people because you had to discipline problem people? Well, we've lost problem people. No, we haven't lost other contributors because of disciplining problem people. We have very occasionally had people who say, well, if you get rid of him, I'm going too. Sometimes those people go too and we're very glad of it. Sometimes those people go too and they're back in 6 weeks. We certainly haven't lost more than 2 or 3 people because of getting rid of problem people. And like I say, usually it's either, oh, thank God, or they're back pretty soon.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting buy-in from existing communities to adapt to more this style of interaction?
So about getting buy-in from the existing community, first of all, if you have a benevolent dictatorship, it's go to the dictator. Figure it out with that person one-on-one and get their buy-in first before you ever present it to the community. And how you do that, well, watch Schwern's keynote. Point out why you need these things. Diversity is good. Friendliness is good for diversity. To get buy-in from a broader community where you either don't have a dictator or the dictator is with you but doesn't want to make a fuss is in that 95% of good but quiet. Same thing really. Point out why this is good for us. Most people, if you present them with an environment where people are being nice and friendly to each other, will like that better than an environment where everybody is constantly knocking off each other. They might not like change, and often we're afraid of change. That's a natural human reaction. But when you get to the point of having a community where more than 3 or 4 people are saying, let's do this nicely, let's work together, let's not flame each other all the time, then show them how it works and let them see that this does not make things fall apart. That's part of why I'm here, to show you guys, hey, we can do this. We have 150 projects and 4,000 contributors. It works.
I have
Is that the end of your question? Yeah.
Maybe terminology question. When you say contributors, what exactly do you mean by that? Do you mean committers or do you mean?
At Apache we have 3, I had these numbers written down, but I think we have 3,200 committers, people who have an actual commit bit, and 4,200 people who have a contributor license agreement on file with us. So it's a subset of all the people who contribute, but it's the people who contribute significantly enough that we've decided that this is a non-trivial patch, and therefore we've asked for a license agreement for their work. Did you have a question? No. No, the gentleman behind you. I wasn't sure if he was stretching or had a question. That's okay. Oh, we have some more. Yep. Two at once. I'm just going to take one of these while we're running around with the mic. Sorry about that. Have you had project forks due to poor dictators or community rifts? Has it been threatened and managed? To my knowledge, we've had one fork and one situation where the entire community left. With the Apache community, the entire community decided this is not working for us, this is not how we want to operate. Part of that was due to our release policies, part of that was just miscommunication and misunderstanding. And so they left and are now a happy, thriving community on Google Code. The other community that we've had that forked due to a problem person was the Couchdb Project. And as far as I know, that community has not forked. The original creator of the project, without wanting to use too emotive language, stormed off and is maintaining his own fork independently. The project community very, very quickly said, this is not us, this is not how we want to be. We are continuing as an Apache community, you know, we're continuing to be a friendly and happy community, and that's how we want to go, we want to stay here. And so that was no problem for us. It was essentially somebody left very publicly and emotively, but an individual left. We have individuals leave all the time. You know, families get in the way, people have new jobs, new hobbies. Whatever happens, that's okay. Our communities are designed to survive somebody leaving, even if they're the person who originally wrote it.
I'm interested how you guys forcibly remove someone from a community if they've been, you know, if you've worked with them and they're a problem person and you.
Yeah, if it's gotten to the point where we have no choice but to remove this person, the first thing you do is you remove their commit bit. Occasionally we also remove their shell account on our servers. We certainly remove any privileges that account has. We typically will moderate their mails so that their mails do not go directly through to our mailing lists. Sometimes what will happen in that case is mails won't be allowed through to our public lists, but will be sent on instead to the PMC, the Project Management Committee's private list, pardon me, so that the PMC can reply to that mail and deal with the content of it without it turning into a flame war on the public lists. And by and large, once they can't shout at us anymore, they kind of fade out and go away.
So my question actually is unrelated to discipline, so my question would be, if you've got a list of, say, you know, on your project, you've got a list of bugs that need to be dealt with. A lot of people like to deal with the fun stuff and the easy stuff. How do you motivate people to deal with the things nobody really wants to do?
One of the things at Apache is that we expect that the core contributors will deal with the things that people don't really want to do. That's a double-edged thing. It means that if you're dealing with those things, it's much more easy to become seen as one of the core contributors, which comes with good feeling and kudos and karma. And the other thing is that we remind each other that nobody wants to be cleaning up after the messy bits. Nobody wants to do the sewer work. Very occasionally somebody wants to do the sewer work, but mostly we all want to do the cool stuff, but the sewer work has to get done. And when you have a community that wants to work together and wants to work as a community, you know, we recognize that we have to pick up each other's trash. Does that answer the question? Okay. Are there any good basic social rules guidelines you'd recommend to a community that's just starting up that they could use as a sort of template? I really like the Linux chicks, be polite, be helpful. Like, if you can't get that down, there's no point going on to anything more complex. The other thing I would add is something from my talk yesterday. If you go to a vote, consensus has failed. I would suggest that if you're just starting up, don't start up as a democracy. Don't start up as we vote on everything. Start up consensus-based. Try and achieve consensus, because if you can't achieve consensus with 3 or 4 people, you're never going to make it with a dozen. How are we doing on time? We're 5 minutes over. That's okay.
I'd just like to add to that for the Linux Chicks one, that one of the rules was most specifically not be nice. And a lot of people kept thinking that that rule should be in there. But it inhibits people who feel that being nice means don't argue, or don't oppose, or don't criticize, or more accurately, don't give any kind of feedback, whether it's constructive criticism or anything that might be perceived as negative. So the be polite and be helpful was all about it's okay to disagree, just not necessarily. So to make sure that you do so in a constructive and helpful and polite way.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Striving for consensus does not mean we don't agree. Sorry, does not mean we can't have disagreement. If you can strive for consensus and still disagree with each other. Consensus is not, I agree with you. Consensus is, I will allow you to continue doing this. It's about consent, not agreement. If I'm going to do something that's going to fundamentally break our project, you should step in and object. If I'm going to do something that you don't think is a great idea, consensus still lets you say, I think that's a really poor idea, but allow me to go ahead with it and try it. We have version control. We can roll this stuff back.
Do we have time for one more question?
One more question.
Okay. Given your experience with what you see in your incubators and so on, is there something specific that you see over and over in the Perl communities, mini communities around specific projects, that you would recommend to be for dictators to try to rectify?
I think the fact that they are dictators. I think the pattern I see over and over is that CPAN modules and the smaller Perl communities are, and even the larger Perl communities, are by and large benevolent dictatorships. And I think that goes very poorly for many types of people and goes most poorly for those types of people who are underrepresented. It's very easy for a benevolent dictatorship to turn into a group of people who look like the dictator. And again, Schwern's keynote talks a little bit more about this. I would say try and work on this stuff. Try and move towards a consensus-driven model. Try and lay out the policies and the roadmap and put all of these things in public so that people can see what your project is about and what it takes to get involved. That would be what I would suggest. And I think we are now way out of time. But thank you all.